injuries here for this first slate of games. So Devontae Adams, it sounded like it was turf toe. We've had some conflicting reports. Some people saying, don't worry about it, and other people saying this could be significant. What's going on with Devontae Adams? What do we expect from him?
So he is dealing with some turf toe. At least that's what all of the reports are saying, that it's turf toe. Turf toe is really just a fancy word for a sprained big toe. A lot of people don't really understand how that injury works. It's basically the ligaments underneath the big toe that are sprained. So it gets hyperextended up and then it sprains it. Very common with wide receivers because they're planning and then pushing really hyperextends that big toe. The problem is that it's not one of those things that tends to get better very quickly. He is doing some light jogging based on reports, so that's a good sign. That means at least it's not hurting him to do some of that jogging. But it's again, that's not really what we're worried about with this. It's more of the plant and go, and that's this is the injury that took AJ Green out last year. And again, he missed a couple weeks, tried to return, and as soon as he tried to do anything that was basically taking his foot back and planting it hard to take off, that's when he actually re-injured it to the point where he needed surgery and he missed the rest of the season. So it's a serious injury. The question is how cautious are they going to be with Adams? I don't expect them to play him this Sunday. If he does somehow play, again, he's going to be limited from that explosion perspective, getting off the line quickly. So you have to play him if he plays, but I really don't expect them to put him out there this week, knowing that the risk is him missing a big chunk of the season if they don't tread lightly with this.
It's going to be interesting to see how this Packers offense looks with a lot of the young receivers that they have having to play a bigger role in the passing game. We've seen MVS kind of step up this year so far opposite Devontae Adams, but not having Devontae Adams out on the field is going to, it'll be something to see who steps up and what the roles are for these guys moving forward. So very interesting news, something to keep an eye on there. What about Jarvis Landry? I know that he was in the concussion protocol. Has he cleared that? Are we expecting him to play, or is he going to be out? What are we hearing there, Ethan?
So as of Thursday night, he actually has not cleared the concussion protocol yet. So this is one where you got to kind of wait and see. With concussions, it's hard with guys that haven't had a ton of them to really gauge how long they're going to miss. Everyone is different as far as concussions go. So it's really a wait and see game. As of Thursday night, he hasn't cleared. That doesn't mean that he can't clear by Saturday. It's one where you're probably going to have to just look for the news. Again, follow me on Twitter at eTurner. FF_PT. I'm going to try to update some of these injuries this week, especially where it really is going to depend a lot on that Friday practice schedule and, of course, the news that comes out on Saturday. So that's sadly I can't give you a for sure answer. I would say if you put me to the fire right now, I would expect him to miss Sunday's game if no news is out by Saturday.
Yeah, you always do a fantastic job of keeping us updated on Twitter, so I definitely recommend everyone follow Ethan on Twitter at eTurnerFF_PT, following him there and making sure that you're paying attention, because anybody that's going to be a game time decision, Ethan's going to have the scoop on, so that's always good. And Jarvis Landry, man, kind of a bummer. He really had his first breakout game as a Cleveland Brown this season, and then the injury kind of happened. So we'll see kind of what happens with that and how that goes. Now, the next guy I want to get to is TJ Hockenson. This is an interesting injury. He went down. It didn't look good. The Lions have a bye this week, so they have some extra time to try to get him healthy. What is that injury? How long is it going to take? And what can we expect moving forward with Hockenson?
Well, Hockenson is dealing with kind of a few different issues. He's obviously in the concussion protocol. If you watch the video, he basically tries to hurdle a defender and then gets the defender isn't fooled by this, which I'm not surprised. Hockenson is a pretty big dude. He doesn't get off his feet very quickly, but basically the defender tackles him and he kind of upends him onto his head. It's a pretty dangerous play. It's a pretty textbook play if you coach high school or JFL. Junior football on why you should not hurdle, because things like this can happen. But basically Hockenson gets flipped over on his head, comes down pretty hard on that neck and head region. He's listed with a concussion and a shoulder injury right now. However, reports are that the team was kind of mulling an IR designation with him, which tells me that this is a pretty serious combination of injuries, whether it's his neck, his shoulder, or the concussion. The team is definitely concerned. The fact that that was listed as something they were deciding on, ultimately they just chose not to put him on the IR, which is good, but it's not a good sign that they were considering it. So that means we're talking a multi-week injury. I'm going to guess right now, just based on the limited data that I have, the little limited info that's coming out, he's going to miss probably at least 3 weeks after their bye week this week. So hopefully some more clarity comes out on this situation. It's very possible that we just haven't gotten the full story yet, but again, that the fact that they were mulling that IR designation really has me a little concerned on this one.
It sounds like there's a lot at play here with Hawkinson. It doesn't sound good. It didn't look good when he went down. So it's not too surprising to me that that this injury is multifaceted. That there's a few different things here. So we'll have to continue monitoring that, and we'll make sure that that we continue to update throughout this process with Ethan here. So Ethan, let's go to some of the injuries that kind of already happened, and we're wondering what's going on with these players. Are they close to returning, or did they have a setback? Kind of what's happened. So first one I want to start with is Michael Gallup over in Dallas. We have been hearing some rumors that he might play, but I'm not so sure what's going to happen there. And we've heard some conflicting things. So what's going on with Michael Gallup here?
Gallup, of course, has been missing. He's missed the last 2 weeks. He had a knee scope after week 2, basically to clean up a meniscus tear that he was dealing with after that. I said after on the show before week 3 that I thought this was going to be a pretty quick turnaround for him. It's looking like that is going to be the case. They're actually expecting him to play this week. So again, probably not going to be at 100%, but the fact that he's suiting up means that from an injury perspective, at least he's good enough to go. So again, probably a flex option if you're really hurting at wide receiver, or at the bye week is hitting you extra hard this week. It shouldn't yet. We're not quite at a bye week purgatory yet, but Gallup is basically a flex play. You're kind of hoping for a touchdown.
Yeah, a couple weeks ago, I remember discussing him with you, and one of the encouraging signs was you had told me that there shouldn't be too much of a lingering issue. When he is cleared, he should be good to go. So while he might not be 100% this week, you kind of think moving forward after this week here, if he does play, he shouldn't have any lingering issues with this knee.
I would not expect it unless it swells up and he gets some of that kind of residual swelling, which we can see occasionally with these meniscus injuries. Unless that bothers him and that inflammation creeps up, it shouldn't be something that really bothers him that much after this week. And we'll know after this week if that's the case.
Okay, and that's great news because, as fantasy owners, we can deal with somebody that's listed as out, but somebody that is dealing with an injury and is playing less than 100% is always tough, tougher to gauge whether or not we should be using that player or not. So let's go on to the next player, and that's Terry McLaurin. We know how valuable he's been. He's been a guy who most fantasy players have been able to acquire off the waiver wire, and he's been startable. He's been a very good fantasy asset. He missed last week on Monday night. It's a short week, short turnaround here with only the 6 days for Washington. Is Terry McLaurin going to be ready?
I'm not expecting him to be ready this week. He missed week 4. He's dealing with a hamstring strain right now. Again, this is one of those things that it just takes time. There's not, you can rehab it, but it's one of those things that can creep up again and again and again if you don't give it the time that it needs the first time. So he is practicing in a limited fashion this week. So that's good. But I don't see any reason for them to kind of rush him back. He has been, for the most part, the only impressive piece of this offense this year so far. So I don't expect them to rush him back, especially with a pretty physical corner in McCourty with the Patriots this week. I don't think it's in their best interest to start him. I think he's probably going to sit at least this week out and probably looking for a return after this week.
Yeah, real tough matchup facing him if he does come back this week against New England pass defense that is historically good starting out the season here. So that doesn't bode well for him, even if he does suit up. So let's go on to Tevin Coleman. And I'm really interested in this one to see how San Francisco uses these backs if they're all fully healthy and what the rotation is. San Francisco has run the ball a higher percent than any team, even Minnesota. A higher percent of their plays than any other NFL team after last week. So this is really interesting to me to see if Devin Coleman is going to be healthy and what his usage is going to be. Ethan, what is Tevin Coleman's status and what do we think moving forward with him as far as this injury goes?
Coleman's been missing with a high ankle sprain. These are sprains that typically take quite a bit to get people back. It's one of those injuries that can really derail an entire season if you aren't careful with it. He has returned practicing this week, which means we're going to be in a limbo of this is my least favorite part of fantasy football, when you get these guys that you can't stash them in the IR because they're listed as questionable because they're getting limited reps in, but they're still probably not going to play. I don't expect Coleman to suit up for this one. They just have too much depth at running back to really kind of try to push him to return. But it is looking like he is going to be a part of that rotation going forward here pretty quick. So probably not starting this week, but definitely by next week. If he sits another week, I think that he's going to be in the mix for this San Francisco team.
So let me ask you a question off that, Ethan. If you are a fantasy team, a fantasy owner that has Tevin Coleman rostered, are you hoping that he sits one more week and comes back, maybe a little bit more healthy, or do you think that if he plays a limited role this week, you don't really think that that's too much of an issue as far as a setback goes?
As far as a setback, no. I mean, I hope they give him more rest, personally, just because I think it would be when he does. If he plays this week, he's not going to be effective. So you're taking up a bench spot, and you're probably not going to be able to start him. So for that, from fantasy perspective, he's not going to be very useful to you this week, most likely. So in my eyes, you just give him another week of rest, and that's better for fantasy owners. So from fantasy perspective, I hope they give him another week, but as far as from an injury perspective, it's not a huge risk, him returning unless something happens. But again, this is an ankle sprain. I really don't expect him to come back, but it's just worth noting that he is practicing again.
Okay, so that's something to monitor too with Tevin Coleman and his situation. If he suits up this week or not. DeSean Jackson, and this is a guy that started out the season just white hot. He was tearing up defenses, and then the injury happened, and we haven't heard from him since. What's going on with DeSean Jackson? Are we expecting him back anytime soon? I know a lot of fantasy owners are starting to get a little restless having him on the roster and not being able to use him.
Yeah, he's a tough guy to sit on your roster because you really I don't think you were expecting him to play. He's again going to be one of those guys that you don't know exactly when he's going to come back. He's still not practicing. He's got this abdominal strain. I don't expect him to return this week. Again, you're just going to have to keep holding on to him from a fantasy perspective. But when bye weeks start rolling around, these are the kind of guys that you have to really make a decision on. Am I going to kind of grunt through this guy that's going to probably take up a bench spot and not be able to get put on IR in an IR slot? And once you have to make some serious lineup decisions, those are the guys that, man, you might have to cut for a player just to have somebody on the field that's actually playing. So a tough decision to be made, but I don't expect him back this week.
Okay, so another week we can expect DeSean Jackson probably not going to suit up here, and it sounds like that's another tough injury for him, that abdominal strain there. Sam Darnold, I'm going to put you on the I'm kind of going to put you to the fire here because I didn't we don't have this. I didn't clear this with you and tell you I was going to ask you this beforehand. So I'm putting you on the spot. Here we go. Sam Darnold, we're recording this on Thursday night, and it sounds like Friday. Sam Darnold is going to have his spleen measured to see whether or not he will play on Friday. After they measure his spleen, he is going to make a determination on whether or not he thinks it's safe to play. How do you measure a spleen? What do they need? What does he need to see, or what do they need to see to say, yeah, we think that you can play? And then even if he does play, I mean, what do we expect, I guess?
Okay, so you definitely put me on blast with this one. I was not expecting this. As far as measuring the spleen, let's talk about that first, because it sounds weird because it's not like it's not like measuring something that's out in the open. I mean, this is an organ. It's not a perfectly round shape. It's kind of an oblong looking organ. So really what you're doing is there's a set of norms on what a person that's his height and weight, what their spleen should look like size wise. They have norms. These are well-researched norms that they can use to then decide if the swelling on his spleen from the mono has reduced to the point where it's no longer putting him at a significant amount of risk for it rupturing if he gets hit. Now, that being said, the way they actually measure it is basically an ultrasound. As far as I know, unless they have some type of crazy technology. Again, I don't measure very many spleens as a physical therapist, but usually, from what I know about this particular disease process, they will use an ultrasound just like if you were going to look at a baby in a pregnant woman's belly, and they will look at the spleen and they will take measurements based on basically the ultrasound pictures that they find. Regardless, they're talking about him possibly playing with special padding to help protect his spleen, which is enlarged due to the mono, from being hit. So he's going to have some type of extra padding in that region anyway. Based on the interview that I saw, he doesn't look very confident in playing. And Dr. David Chow, Pro Football Doc, always talks about these decisions then and how they make decisions. It's the team, the doctor, or medical staff, and the player themselves. And all three have to be on board with this person returning. I can tell you from the interview, it doesn't sound like Sam Darnold is super thrilled about possibly returning. And as he put it, he doesn't want to die. So this is a serious issue. I don't expect him to return this week. I think they're going to give him another week. We're looking at possibly week 6 or 7 before he returns. But yeah, it is interesting to think about them like measuring his spleen and that being the thing that is one of the deciding factors for him returning. It's kind of an interesting. It's not something you hear about very often in football. Normally it's like, can he run? But for him, it's is his spleen small enough yet?
Yeah, and I remember us talking about this again, Ethan, a couple weeks back, and I was shocked to hear that part of mononucleosis that you had shared with me is that your spleen is enlarged, and that's really how dangerous it is for athletes. It's because their spleen gets is enlarged, and the chances of rupturing it are higher. So I remember that conversation that we had, and now hearing that they're going to measure his spleen, it's just been a bizarre type of injury and something that we don't hear about a lot. So yeah, I definitely wanted to get your feedback on it. Thank you for allowing me to kind of freelance a little bit with that one. So
I will add a fun fact here real quick.
Oh yeah.
Because you brought it up. I did a quick little Google search. I'm pretty quick on the Google searching. That's what you get when you go to school for as long as I did. And fun fact, the average white male, 19 years old, has a spleen width of 5.2 centimeters and a length of about 10.82 centimeters. This was based on about 500 white males around the age of 19 that they guessed. So if you're wondering how big his spleen probably is, it's probably somewhere in that range, about 5.2 centimeters. So that doesn't mean anything for whether or not he's returning. I just thought that was, you asked about spleen. We're talking about how big a spleen could be. So that's what a normal spleen would look like.
So there you go. You heard it here. So when you get those spleen measurements in, you can just come right here. You can listen to Ethan and he'll tell you exactly what a spleen should be at. And then you can see Sam Darnold's measurements and you can kind of decipher for yourself if you think it's safe for him to play or not. So
highly unlikely they actually post it. I would
think not, right?
I hope someone asks him how big his spleen was, because that would be something I would want to know personally.
Yeah, well, I'm sure there are very few people who would want to know, but you might be one of them, Ethan. So let's go to the last player that we got here, and that's Saquon Barkley. Is it absolutely nuts to think that this guy can play this week after coming back from a high ankle sprain, and he's taken like no time to heal? To me, this is so bizarre, and I almost worry because this is so much quicker than what we expected. Is this normal? Is this something we can expect? Is he going to play this week?
Is this normal? No, this is not normal by any stretch. I don't think anything Saquon Barkley does is normal. I always say he has what I would call star healing, and star healing is a phrase that I have coined within my own analysis, which basically says that the stars of football, your absolute studs, always, 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 always return faster than you expect them to. So if a normal player is out 6 weeks, your Tevin Coleman's of the world with a high ankle sprain, 3 weeks missed automatically. 3 to 6 weeks is the timeline. Your Saquon Barkley's, you're going to start hearing rumblings at a week and a half because for whatever reason, stars are just made differently. They heal better. I don't understand it. Again, I haven't been able to study that specifically, but I'm telling you, everything that I've found in the last 3 years of covering NFL injuries tells me that if you have a absolute stud, and Saquon Barkley qualifies as that, they almost always return faster than the normal NFL player. So is it crazy that we're talking about it? Yes, absolutely. From Saquon Barkley versus the norm. He's in his own separate little category. I still think a return this week is unlikely because to me personally, despite the star power that he has and this star healing, I don't see the Giants pushing the issue on this guy in particular. The team will probably hold him back more than he'll hold himself back, but it is looking very much like next week could be a possibility for him returning. Me personally, I think a much softer matchup against the Cardinals in Week 7 is the most likely return date for Barkley. But don't be surprised if you hear him suiting up next week.
Yeah, that's crazy to me. It's absolutely
It
crazy.
crazy.
I like the way you explained it, though. So what is it? Star healing? That's what we're calling it.
I mean, yeah, that's essentially what it is. I mean,
I like
it's
it.
star healing. I mean, they heal different. They function differently than what the normal person does. I don't understand it. I wish somebody would study it so that I could read the study and really understand it better. But everything I've seen, the studs always get better faster. Maybe it's the work ethic. They don't become studs by not having incredible work ethic. So, they take rehab very, very seriously, and possibly that's why. But again, I don't really know for sure.
Yeah. I heard a lot of that about, a lot of people contributing him being able to do this early is because he did anything and everything that was asked of him from the medical team as far as his rehab goes. So that plays an important role, I'm sure, in this. But it's interesting. But I think you're right. I think a nice, easy matchup against Arizona is the way to go. And Wayne Gallman actually looked good last week. I don't know if there's a need to rush back your star running back here for a matchup against the Vikings. It seems like a tough game already anyhow. So, yeah. So Ethan, thank you so much for this. We will catch up with you next time on the flip side, man. Thanks again.